My name is Aria Bennett, and I'm 29 years old. What was supposed to be a celebration of love and commitment turned into the most humiliating night of my life. It was our first wedding anniversary, and I had planned to remember it forever, for joy, for laughter, for everything good that came with love. But instead, everything fell apart. We were hosting a grand party at our home in Willowdale, a charming little city where I'd grown up. I had inherited this house from my parents, and it held all my most precious memories. My husband, Caleb, was 31, a man I once believed to be kind, patient, and loyal. He worked as a real estate consultant, and when we got married, I truly thought I had found my forever. The house was decorated beautifully that night. Lights shimmered along the walls, music played softly in the background, and laughter echoed through every corner. Our friends, colleagues, and extended family were gathered in the dining hall, raising their glasses and clinking them in toasts. Even Marilyn, Caleb's mother, was there, her signature pearls and expensive perfume reminding everyone of her status. She was a retired fashion boutique owner, known for her elegance and icy demeanor. At first, the night went smoothly, but as the evening progressed, I noticed Marilyn's smile becoming sharper, more forced. Her eyes followed me around the room, and her conversations were laced with subtle jabs. I ignored it. I reminded myself that this was my celebration. Then came the moment I'll never forget. Marilyn stood up during dinner, tapped her glass with her ring, and commanded the room's attention. "I have something important to say," she declared, her voice calm but heavy. Everyone turned toward her. Caleb looked confused. I looked at her, puzzled. She raised her bare wrist, showing the faint tan line where her luxury gold watch had once been. "My watch," she said slowly, "a family heirloom worth thousands, has gone missing. And the last person near my room was Aria." My heart dropped. I stared at her, shocked. "No," I stammered. "I don't know what you're talking about. I haven't been near." "Don't lie," she snapped, her composure cracking. "You've always been envious of our family's lifestyle. Admit it. You stole it." The room fell silent. Eyes turned toward me. Caleb stood, and I looked to him for support. Instead, he shouted, "Aria, if you took it, give it back. Don't make this worse." "I didn't take anything," I cried. "How can you believe this?" And then, before I could say another word, he struck me across the face. Gasps filled the room. I stumbled back, clutching my cheek, humiliated and stunned. "I'm calling the police," Caleb said coldly. Minutes later, I was dragged out of my own home in handcuffs, my face burning with pain, my soul shattered by betrayal. Marilyn smiled. Caleb stood tall, and the people I had welcomed into my home looked away. But what they didn't know was, I'd be back. And I wouldn't come back empty-handed. The ride in the back of the police car felt unreal. My hands were cuffed, my cheeks still stung from Caleb's slap, and I could barely see through the tears clouding my vision. I had never felt so humiliated, so utterly discarded. The flashing red and blue lights reflected off the car windows, each pulse reminding me that my life, everything I had believed in, had just shattered. At the station, I was processed like a criminal. Fingerprints. Mugshot. Cold stares from officers who already believed I was guilty. They led me into a small, dimly lit interrogation room. The fluorescent light above flickered slightly as two officers came in and began their questions. "Did you steal the watch? Have you had conflicts with your mother-in-law before? Were you near her room during the party?" I repeated my truth, over and over. "No, I didn't take anything. I have no idea where the watch is." But they didn't believe me. I could hear it in their voices, see it in their eyes. They thought I was just another jealous woman who wanted a taste of luxury. One officer even sighed loudly when I asked for a glass of water. They searched my purse, my clothes, even my shoes. They found nothing, because there was nothing to find. Hours passed before they finally let me go. "No sufficient evidence," they mumbled. But the damage was already done. My reputation, my dignity, my sense of belonging, it had all been ripped away. It was 4 a.m. when I stepped out of that station. I stood alone under the streetlights of Willowdale, clutching my coat tightly around me. not knowing where to go. I couldn't return to my house. The house I had inherited, the one Caleb and Marilyn now claimed as their own. Somehow, during our marriage, they had manipulated the paperwork, twisting the law into something I didn't recognize. All while I trusted them. All while I believed love protected me. I found a cheap motel on the edge of town. It smelled of bleach and dust, but I didn't care. I collapsed onto the worn-out bed, stared at the cracked ceiling, and for the first time that night, I allowed myself to break down completely. My phone buzzed with messages and missed calls. Friends. Distant relatives. Neighbors. None of them asked if I was okay. They all wanted the same thing, the story. Gossip wrapped in faux concern. I ignored them all. I was exhausted. Emotionally. Physically. Mentally. But beneath that exhaustion, something else began to rise, rage. They had taken everything from me. But I wasn't going to let them win. The next morning, I sat on the edge of the motel bed staring at myself in the cracked mirror. My face was pale, my eyes swollen, and the red mark from Caleb's slap still burned on my cheek. I didn't recognize the woman looking back at me. But beneath the bruises and the pain, something had shifted. I wasn't just broken. I was angry. I had trusted Caleb. I had welcomed his mother into my home. I had bent over backward trying to keep peace, to be the good wife, the kind daughter-in-law. And what did I get? Public humiliation. Betrayal. Homelessness. And then, as if the universe wanted to mock me further, I received an eviction notice. I stared at the document in disbelief. The house, my house, the one left to me by my parents, was now legally under Caleb's name. He had used our marriage to quietly transfer ownership, exploiting my trust and love like a predator. I crumpled the notice in my hands. That was my breaking point. The Arya that once wanted to keep the peace, that tried to see the good in everyone, was gone. A new Arya was rising, one who refused to be a victim. I gathered what little energy I had left and returned to the police station, not as a suspect this time, but as someone ready to fight back. I asked to speak with someone about filing a formal complaint. The officer at the desk gave me a tired look, clearly assuming this was just a domestic issue. "It's probably a misunderstanding," he said, already turning back to his computer. "No," I said firmly. "It's fraud, theft, abuse. And I have proof." That's when they introduced me to Detective Naomi Clark, a woman in her early 40s with sharp eyes and a calm presence. She listened, really listened, as I told her everything. From Marilyn's calculated insults to Caleb's growing passivity, from the false accusation at the party to the slap, the arrest, the forged paperwork, and the stolen house. "I know it sounds like a lot," I said, my voice shaking. "But it's all true. They've taken everything from me." Naomi didn't brush me off. She nodded slowly, her voice steady. "They sound clever. But clever people leave trails. We'll find them." For the first time in days, I felt something other than despair, hope. We opened a case. Detective Naomi Clark didn't waste time. The next morning, she called me in for a formal statement. I sat across from her in a small, quiet office with a notepad in my lap and my hands still trembling. But this time, I wasn't scared. I was ready. I told her everything. Dates, conversations, financial details, moments that once felt too small to matter, but now revealed a larger pattern. Naomi asked thoughtful questions, never rushing me, and took meticulous notes. When I mentioned Caleb's name being added to the house deed shortly after our wedding, her eyes narrowed slightly. "Do you still have the original paperwork?" she asked. "Yes," I said, nodding. "My parents' will, the deed, the bank documents, I kept them all in a fireproof lockbox." "Where's the lockbox now?" I hesitated. It was in the bedroom closet. Caleb must have taken it. Naomi scribbled a note and assured me they'd look into it. The following days were slow, but steady. Naomi assigned a small team to begin gathering evidence, pulling my financial records, checking property transfers, and reviewing Caleb's banking activity. I turned over every text, email, and receipt I could find. At the same time, I tried to rebuild some stability. I was still staying at the motel, room 112, which had become my tiny shelter from the storm. The woman who managed the place, Elsie was a kind-hearted soul in her 60s with silver curls and a raspy voice from years of smoking. She brought me coffee every morning without asking and always left a warm meal by my door when she knew I hadn't eaten. "You don't owe them your tears, sweet girl," she told me one night, sitting beside me on the small bench outside my room. "What they did to you, that ain't love. That's poison." Her kindness held me together more than she knew. 2 weeks into the investigation, Naomi called me in with a spark of excitement in her voice. "Aria," she said as I sat down across from her again, "we found something." She slid a folder toward me. Inside were records showing Caleb had opened a secret trust account under his name just weeks after we married. Thousands of dollars, money from my inheritance, had been funneled into it slowly and carefully over time. The transfers were disguised as routine expenses, home renovations, insurance payments, maintenance. But all of it led straight to him. I stared at the papers, my stomach twisting. I felt betrayed all over again. The man I'd shared a bed with, trusted with my heart, had been stealing from me in plain sight. Naomi looked at me with a steady gaze. "This is solid evidence. It proves intent. He wasn't just being passive, he was complicit. And we're looking deeper into Marilyn's involvement. I have a feeling she's the architect behind all of this." I nodded slowly, anger burning beneath my ribs. "I want to stop them from selling the house."
Can we do that?
Naomi gave me a half-smile. "Already on it. We've filed an emergency injunction. They can't touch that property now, not until we finish this case." It was the first real victory. But I knew the fight wasn't over. I had just started to take my life back. As the investigation gained momentum, so did my resolve. Every morning I woke up, poured a cup of motel coffee, and reminded myself, they will not win. Detective Naomi Clark kept me informed every step of the way. She was methodical, patient, and relentless. A few days after freezing the house sale, she called me in again. This time, her tone carried weight. "Aria," she said, sliding a printed email across the desk, "we just hit gold." I leaned in and scanned the page. My heart dropped as I read the subject line. "Steps to secure full ownership." It was an email Marilyn had sent Caleb just a few weeks before our anniversary. In it, she detailed how to manipulate me into transferring assets, what lies to tell, and even how to use the party as a perfect distraction if things got messy. "Get her drunk if you have to," one line read. "Make her sign the paperwork while she's emotional." I stared at the words, stunned. All those moments I had brushed off, her snide comments, Caleb's sudden insistence on updating joint accounts, the pressure to trust blindly. They had been part of a plan. A premeditated betrayal. Naomi sat back in her chair, watching me process the weight of it. "This goes far beyond fraud. This is calculated emotional abuse." She coached him through every move. Tears welled up in my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. I wouldn't give Marilyn the satisfaction, not even in memory. "Can we use this in court?" I asked quietly. "Absolutely," Naomi replied. "This is damning. The DA's office is preparing formal charges against both of them. We're going to get your house back, your money, and your name." For the first time, I believed her. In the weeks that followed, I began to feel like myself again. Not the naive woman clinging to a broken marriage, but the woman who had survived it. I started helping Naomi and her team by organizing every document I had left, listing details of every conversation that once seemed irrelevant. Little pieces that now added up to a full picture of manipulation and greed. Elsie, the motel manager, became like family during that time. She even took a photo of me one afternoon and pinned it to the bulletin board behind the front desk. "Strongest woman I know," she said proudly. I smiled through tears. Not because I was broken, but because someone finally saw me for who I really was. Then one evening, just as the sun dipped below the trees outside room 112, Naomi called again. "Aria," she said, her voice serious. "They tried to list the house under a fake name. Marilyn used a shell identity and hired a private agent to bypass the injunction. If we hadn't flagged it in time, the property could have been sold offshore." My blood ran cold. They were desperate, dangerous. But Naomi was already a step ahead. We've got them on attempted fraud, obstruction, and identity falsification. With the theft and abuse charges, this case is airtight now. I sat quietly, letting it all sink in. "Are you ready to take them to court?" she asked. I didn't hesitate. "Yes." I've never been more ready. The day of the trial arrived sooner than I expected. I stood outside the Willowdale County Courthouse, dressed in a simple navy suit, my heart pounding beneath my ribs. The sky was gray, and a cool breeze swept through the trees lining the courthouse steps. It felt like the calm before a storm, one I had been preparing for, one I was ready to walk into. Detective Naomi Clark met me at the doors. She gave me a firm nod and a reassuring smile. "You're going to do great," she said. "You're not the one on trial here. They are." Inside the courtroom, everything was still, too still. The quiet buzz of lawyers and shuffling papers filled the space, but to me, it sounded distant. My eyes scanned the room until they landed on Caleb and Marilyn, sitting together at the defense table. Marilyn was composed as ever, dressed in a tailored black dress with pearls at her neck. But this time, her smile was gone. Caleb looked pale and uneasy, fidgeting with his cufflinks, avoiding my gaze. I took a deep breath and sat down beside Naomi and the district attorney assigned to the case, Rachel Marks, a fierce, confident woman with an iron will and a brilliant legal mind. She nodded at me and whispered, "Let's bring them down." The trial began. Rachel opened with a powerful statement. "This case is not about misunderstanding. It's about manipulation, betrayal, and premeditated theft." Aria Bennett was not just emotionally abused, she was targeted and stripped of her rightful inheritance by those she trusted most. I watched as the jury listened intently, some of them already glancing over at Caleb and Marilyn with suspicion. Over the next several days, Rachel presented the evidence, financial records showing the siphoning of funds, the fraudulent property transfer documents, and the email communications between Marilyn and Caleb. Naomi testified with confidence, laying out the investigation step by step. She explained how Marilyn orchestrated the entire scheme, how Caleb followed her instructions, and how I had been painted as a thief to cover their tracks. Then it was my turn to testify. I stood before the court, my voice shaking at first, but growing stronger with every word. I loved Caleb. I trusted Marilyn. I gave them everything I had, my heart, my home, my loyalty. And in return, they humiliated me, stole from me, and tried to destroy my life. I paused, making sure to meet the jury's eyes. But I refused to stay silent. I fought back, not just for myself, but for every person who's ever been manipulated into thinking they were the problem. I'm here to tell you, I wasn't the problem. They were. When I stepped down from the witness stand, the room was silent. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt powerful. Then came one of the most unforgettable moments of the trial. Rachel turned to Marilyn during cross-examination. "Mrs. Langston," she said, cool and calm, "can you explain why you accused Aria of stealing your watch when no physical evidence of theft was ever found?" Marilyn faltered. I believed she had taken it." Rachel narrowed her eyes. Believed? Or was it a convenient excuse to justify taking over her home and assets? Silence. Marilyn opened her mouth, but no words came out. The courtroom was still. The jury saw everything they needed in that moment. The final day of the trial felt like the closing chapter of a book I never wanted to write, but one I needed to finish. When the jury returned to the courtroom, every breath in the room felt held in suspension. I sat upright, my hands clenched in my lap, staring straight ahead, refusing to give in to the tremor in my spine. The foreperson stood, unfolding the paper slowly. For the charges of fraud, theft, and emotional abuse, we find the defendants, Caleb Langston and Marilyn Langston, guilty on all counts. I closed my eyes as the words sank in. Guilty. A surge of emotion rushed through me. Relief, validation, justice. All the pain, the betrayal, the sleepless nights in that motel room, it had all led to this. I felt tears rise, but this time they weren't tears of sorrow. They were something else entirely. The judge's voice rang through the courtroom. Based on the overwhelming evidence presented and the jury's unanimous verdict, this court sentences Caleb Langston to 9 years in state prison and Marilyn Langston to 11 years for conspiracy, financial fraud, identity falsification, and emotional abuse. Their assets were frozen. The house was to be returned to me immediately. All the money siphoned from my inheritance was to be repaid in full, with interest. Caleb looked like he'd aged 10 years in those few moments. His hands shook as bailiffs approached to cuff him. Marilyn didn't resist. For the first time, her mask was completely gone. No pearls. No icy smile. Just a bitter, broken woman who thought she could destroy someone without consequence. As they were led away, I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Naomi leaned toward me, whispering, "They got what they deserved." I nodded, blinking back tears. "Thanks to you." "No," she said gently. "Thanks to you. You never gave up." I walked out of that courthouse feeling like the weight of a mountain had been lifted from my chest. The sky above Willowdale was brighter than it had been in weeks, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I breathed freely. Justice had been served. But my journey wasn't over yet. Now it was time to reclaim what was mine. The following days felt like a dream, one I had never allowed myself to believe would come true. The house, my parents' beloved home, was returned to me. I stood in front of it, keys in hand, unsure whether to laugh or cry. The lawn was overgrown, the flower beds dull, but it was still my home. Every creak in the floorboards, every crack in the paint, held a memory I thought had been stolen from me forever. I walked through each room slowly, touching the walls as if they might disappear again. Marilyn's ornate furniture was gone. Caleb's upgrades stripped away. The house was quiet, empty, but it finally felt like mine again. The first thing I did was redecorate. Not to erase the past, but to breathe new life into it. I painted the walls soft earth tones, replaced the curtains with warm linen, and filled every corner with things I loved: books, plants, photographs of my parents. It was healing one brushstroke at a time. I hired a new financial advisor to help me sort through what was left of my inheritance. Thanks to the court order, every penny Caleb had stolen was being returned, slowly but surely. My savings were being restored, my accounts unfrozen. But more than the money, what I reclaimed was my independence. Elsie, the kind motel manager who had taken care of me like family, came over one afternoon for tea. We sat in the garden under the shade of the old oak tree, sipping tea and watching the wind play with the leaves. "You did it, honey," she said, smiling with that familiar warmth. "You took your life back." I nodded, holding her hand gently. "I never could have done it without people like you and Naomi." She shook her head. "You did the hard part. You survived them. And you came out stronger." She was right. I wasn't the same woman who had walked out of that house in handcuffs. I wasn't the woman who had begged her husband to believe her, who had been slapped in front of a crowd and silenced with humiliation. I was someone new now. Months passed, and little by little, life began to feel normal again. But it wasn't the old version of normal, it was something better. Something I was building for myself from the ground up. I had always been passionate about interior styling, a hobby I picked up from my mother. So, I decided to turn that passion into a profession. I launched a small freelance home decor business, offering personalized room makeovers and budget-friendly design plans. At first, I took on tiny projects, friends of friends, local referrals, but word spread quickly. By the end of that first month, I had 5 active clients and a waiting list. Work became my therapy. It gave me purpose, a reason to get up each morning. It reminded me that I was capable, not just of surviving, but of thriving. Detective Naomi Clark called occasionally to check in. "I just wanted to see how you're holding up," she'd say. But her voice always carried pride, like an older sister quietly rooting for me in the background. One day, I thanked her again. "You didn't just help me win a case," I told her. "You helped me find myself again." She chuckled softly. "You did that on your own. I just gave you the flashlight." The emotional healing was slower. Some nights, I'd wake up drenched in sweat, flashes of that night, of Caleb's betrayal, of Marilyn's smirk, still flickering in the corners of my mind. But those moments began to fade with time, replaced by quiet mornings in the garden, laughter over dinner with Elsie, and the joy of seeing a client's face light up at a finished project. One afternoon, while organizing the attic, I found an old photo tucked inside a dusty box. It was me and Caleb from our honeymoon. We were smiling, arms wrapped around each other, blissfully unaware of the chaos ahead. I stared at it for a long time. And then, without hesitation, I tore it in half. There was no sadness, no regret, just peace. That chapter was over. Completely. One evening, about 6 months after the trial ended, I stood in the backyard of my reclaimed home, surrounded by people who had become my chosen family. The warm Willowdale breeze rustled through the trees. Soft music played from the speakers I'd set up near the patio. Paper lanterns swayed above us, casting a gentle golden glow over the garden. It wasn't extravagant. It didn't need to be. It was real. Simple. Mine. I had invited only a few people. Elsie, of course, and her husband Harold. A couple of my new design clients who had become close friends. And Detective Naomi Clark, who showed up in jeans and a cardigan, holding a bottle of sparkling cider and a rare, easy smile. "You've done something beautiful here," Naomi said as she looked around the garden. I smiled, brushing a curl behind my ear. "Not just the house," I replied. "My life." As the evening continued, laughter bubbled up from every corner. People danced, told stories, and toasted to new beginnings. I stood at the edge of it all for a moment, just soaking it in. 6 months ago, I had been dragged out of this same house in handcuffs, shamed and abandoned. Now, I stood tall, proud, and surrounded by warmth. Later that night, as the guests left and the stars blanketed the sky, I sat alone on the back steps, sipping the last of my cider. I looked up at the sky and whispered, "Thank you, Mom and Dad. I kept it. I kept the house. I kept my name. And I'm finally okay." It wasn't the life I had imagined when I said I do to Caleb, but it was so much better. I had found strength I didn't know I had. I had rebuilt everything they tried to destroy. And I had done it on my own terms. This was my story. And though the chapter with Caleb and Marilyn had ended, the rest of the book was still being written by me. I am Aria Bennett, and I am free. Thank you for watching Aria's powerful story of courage and justice. If her journey inspired you, don't forget to like the video, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. Your support means the world.